The novel The House on Mango Street is narrated by the protagonist, Esperanza, who throughout time comes across a variety of social and cultural experiences. These experiences allowed Esperanza to discover who she truly is, who she wants to be, and what she wants for her future. Although formatted into brief stages and periods in time, such as vignettes, the main character, Esperanza's life experiences, are covered throughout the novel The House on Mango Street. Esperanza meets new characters and begins to experience her transition into womanhood. Because of everything she experiences on Mango Street and the neighborhood, Esperanza develops a settled decision on who it is she wants to be. Esperanza introduces herself as the girl who has lived in many places prior to the one on Mango Street. She hasn't necessarily had the opportunity to explore her identity. She has always longed for a better life, which we do come to recognize as Esperanza builds her personality throughout the novel. Towards the beginning of the story, Esperanza introduces her close family members, and we learn to know that she does love them. We didn't always live on Mango Street. Before that, we lived on Loomis on the 3rd floor, and before that, we lived on Keeler. Before Keeler, it was Paulina, and before that, I can't remember. But what I remember most is moving a lot. Each time it seemed there'd be one more of us. Papa, Carlos, Kiki, my sister Nini, and me. Cisneros says this on page 3. Esperanza must feel overwhelmed moving around between living spaces and having so many people around her constantly. Not only this, Esperanza is still experiencing her adolescence years and has a yearning to make new friends. We witness Esperanza in situations in which it may seem difficult for her to feel welcome or feel like she can fit in. She begins slightly introvert, and she realizes that she wants to interact socially and culturally in order to make friends and adapt to her new neighborhood. One of the first things that Esperanza states on page 10 in the vignette, My Name, is, I would baptize myself under a new name, a name more like the real me, the one nobody sees. Esperanza as Lisandra or Maritza or Zizi, the ex. It is as if Esperanza does not classify with her name and possibly her background. She simply does not want anything that classifies her as coming from a low-income family who has had to move around plenty of times, or anything that will make her feel like a pariah. Moving around so many times has made it hard for Esperanza to be able to build friendships and foundations with individuals, which is why she is longing a friendship that she can learn from and build on. She knows what it is that she wants in a friend and the type of friendship that she wants. However, when she encounters the first group of girls, Rachel and Lucy, she holds back and thinks about what the girls will think of her name and of her. She is very aware of the lifestyle she takes on, but she does not like the idea of being embarrassed by her home or socioeconomic or cultural status. Their clothes are crooked and old. They are wearing shiny Sunday shoes without socks, but I like them. Cisneros, pages 14 to 15. With this statement, Esperanza does not seem judgmental towards others. This is a part of my first post on the discussion board. As Esperanza explores her new neighborhood, she continues to interact with many of her neighbors and local business owners, one of them being Marin, one of the local neighbors. Esperanza observes how Marin is and eventually comes to admire her in some aspects. She is older and she knows lots of things. She is the one who told us how Davy the baby's sister got pregnant and what cream is best for taking off mustache hair, and if you count the white flecks on your fingernails, you can know how many boys are thinking of you, and lots of other things I can't remember now. Page 26. Over time, Esperanza's perspectives do seem to change, but in this case, she seemed to admire someone like Marin because she was older and knew more what she wanted, or at least that was what Esperanza thought. It is later on in the novel that Esperanza becomes more independent to the point where she meets new people, gets a new job, and possibly begins to think differently. Throughout the middle of the novel, we begin to witness Esperanza's transition into womanhood. One of the first things Esperanza does to develop a sense of independence and expand her real-world experiences within the community is get her first job. I needed money. The Catholic high school cost a lot, and Papa said nobody went to public school unless you wanted to turn out bad. At this point, Esperanza not only applied for a job because of her need for independence, but also her need for money. When lunchtime came, I was scared to eat alone in the company lunchroom with all those men and ladies looking, so I ate real fast standing in one of the washroom stalls and had lots of time left over, so I went back to work early. But then break time came, and not knowing where else to go, I went into the coat room because there was a bench there. Page 55. This reminds me of the times when I first started working. I felt nervous at times, but I knew I was truly there to make the money. Eventually, I did find myself becoming more comfortable the longer and the more jobs I worked. Esperanza comes to the realization that she begins to encounter the experiences of a young adult. She also encounters many characters and has experiences that possibly change or trigger her perceptions on certain things. One day you wake up and they are there, ready and waiting like a new Buick with the keys in the ignition, ready to take you where? Page 49. This is a great transition into Esperanza's exploration into womanhood, the discovery on how the female body changes, especially during the growth stage. She is beginning to notice how older, developed women are perceived in opposition to them as young girls. They're good for holding a baby when you're cooking. Turning the jump rope, you need them to dance, Esperanza mentions in the vignette Hips on page 49. She realizes that hips are part of women's growth and overall development. It is what the men find attractive, and it is the advantage for women, as Esperanza portrays it. On the avenue, a boy on a homemade bicycle calls out, "Ladies, lead me to heaven," Cisneros, page 41. In the vignette, The Family with Little Feet, Esperanza describes the reactions she received when wearing heels. The simple deception of appearing a certain age made her and her friends receive a different reaction. In the same vignette, Esperanza describes a different reaction from an older man. "Them are too dangerous," he says. "You girls too young to be wearing shoes like that. Take them shoes off before I call the cops, but we just run." Page 41. Although this reaction is different to that of the boy on the bicycle, this set of lines does hint the idea of Esperanza growing up and having a desire to look and act older and more mature. Much of this becomes a part of Esperanza's character development. Towards the end of the novel, Esperanza realizes that maybe she has warmed up to the lifestyle, or at least the people on Mango Street. She does, however, also realize that she wants something more than to live on Mango Street all her life. After watching this video on Sandra Cisneros sharing her perspective and ideas on the book, I realized some things she mentioned that stood out. Looking for her home in male-dominated culture. And it almost reminds me of Sandra Cisneros and her passion for writing. One day I will pack my bags of books and paper. One day I will say goodbye to Mango. Esperanza eventually knows that she wants to leave Mango Street and find out what goes beyond it. They will not know I have gone away to come back, for the ones I left behind, for the ones who cannot out. Cisneros 110. This is a very powerful ending because it represents the impact that her new home on Mango Street had on her, as well as the friend that she made, her family, and anyone else she came to admire. Esperanza's character definitely evolves over time to the point where she does identify what she wants and hints in bits and pieces who she wants to be. After watching this video on Sandra Cisneros sharing her perspective and ideas on the book, I realized some things she mentioned that stood out. For example, Esperanza seems to be looking for her own home in a male-dominated culture. Another thing she mentioned is that anything that passed through Cisneros' own heart is something that she could write about. I also liked how she said that she picked up experiences, places, and people to put them together to combine and create a new invented neighborhood, that being the house on Mango Street. She said, as an artist, you manipulate time, you move things around, you cut and shape the way a gardener would. I enjoyed Cisneros' sense of humor and how her descriptive language many times became humorous as well. From the beginning of the book, I have come across plenty of descriptive language and imagery. As the chronological events throughout the story expand, I was able to imagine much of what the narrator describes. His feet were fat and doughy like thick tamales, and these he powdered and stuffed into white socks and brown leather shoes. Page 39. The baby's feet had 10 tiny toes, pale and see-through like a salamander's, and these he popped into his mouth whenever he was hungry. 39 to 40. These are both great examples of Cisneros' use of similes and descriptive language. I was able to visualize what Esperanza narrated. Words of caution for reading the book. Every vignette adds up to portions of Esperanza's experiences, so it's important that you look out for each event. Time passes throughout the book, so it's important that you look towards Esperanza's character development throughout these vignettes. Some suggestions for instructional use of this particular title may be, this book can be great for in and out of class activities such as in-class or at-home journals, so that the students may be able to relate to Esperanza's or Sandra Cisneros' narrating style. You could even have students perform skits of topics that highlight certain themes, perhaps Esperanza's transition to womanhood, symbolism, or descriptive language. Students could use props and visual representations to demonstrate their analysis of the text, as well as their reactions to their peers' presentations. Some recommendations of this book in terms of student population. I do believe that this book might be best fitting in culturally and socioeconomically diverse communities because it is a setting in which these students may be able to relate to. Perhaps students from low-income neighborhoods as well. They may be able to relate in terms of community. I do, however, believe that no matter the gender, race, etc., anyone should read this book if they had the chance, so that they could place themselves in one's shoes and determine a perspective different from their own, or perhaps even similar.
The House on Mango Street is about a young woman's search for a house of her own, and by that I meant the character was looking for another way to be, otro modo de ser. I'm quoting from Rosario Castellano, the Mexican feminist and novelist. But people also take that she was looking for a real physical home. And yes, that's true, but only insofar as it could create a space for her to reinvent herself, another way to be other than what you inherit from our culture that is very male-dominated. In my own life, I was not aware when I was writing Esperanza's story that I was also going to be writing some parts of my life in the future. So subsequently, people blur the book for my own life. In relation to House on Mango Street, people always ask, are you Esperanza? Did this happen to you? And I'm not Esperanza. I'm the sum of all the stories that have passed through me, that I've heard, that I've witnessed. And Esperanza becomes a composite of all of the above. So sometimes people presume that what happened to Esperanza happened to me. Not necessarily, but certainly some things that happened, anything that passed through my heart is what I can write about. So if something happened to you, if something happened to my students, my mother, if something happened to myself, I take all of those pieces and I put them into Esperanza. So some fibers of those stories are mine. There is no Mango Street in Chicago. There is a Mango Avenue. I didn't know that a Mango Avenue existed when I wrote House on Mango Street. The House on Mango Street is based on a real house in a real neighborhood, Humboldt Park, at a real address. But I picked up experiences and stories from other neighborhoods I lived in, other places I teached at, other communities I visited, and manipulated them and put them in this invented neighborhood called the House on Mango Street. In real life, the house was not on Mango Avenue or Mango Street. It was on Campbell Street. But I couldn't call it the house on Campbell Street because everybody would think of the soup, right? And at that time, I wasn't a very good storyteller, so I thought, well, what sounds like Campbell but has nothing to do with Campbell? And I just would say it, and as I was a poet, I would say it until a word that had more or less those vowel sounds so I could trick myself. However, when I moved into this neighborhood, the house on Campbell Street, it was not like the house on Mango Street. When I moved away from the house on Campbell Street, it looked like the neighborhood of the house on Mango Street. So you, as an artist, manipulate time, you move things around, you cut and shape the way a gardener would shape a garden so that you can see certain flowers and pay attention to certain plants. Otherwise, it's just a jungle. And it's the writer's job to cut away and prune and shape and make order from that jungle so that you can pay attention and see certain colors and patterns. And that's what I did with the real house on Mango Street from my memory and the invented house on Mango Street in my fiction.